So then unconditional self-love becomes really core to this, it seems?
Well, of course, it's all there. In other words, let's just use all the words that we can think of when you're in the vortex: tuned in, tapped in, turned on, being who you are, being blended, being in alignment, absence of resistance and complete allowance, being authentically me, being totally who I really am, being unconditional love, being in tune with all that is good, being a vibrational match to well-being. And let's say more of what it is: feeling elation, feeling interest in things, feeling vitality, feeling joyous love of life. In other words, everything that you can imagine that rings your bells or feels good is all about that. Because life caused you to become it, and once life has caused you to become it, you got to be it or you feel less than what you've become. That's the thing about this expansion. That's why none of you should ever come and consciously expand, because then you have an obligation to yourself to keep up with the expansion. You can't go back. But whether you knew it or not, you still couldn't go back, because life continues to cause you to be more, and you got to keep up with who you are. You just have to. And in the big picture, you always do. Because in the big picture, when you return to pure positive energy, which you always do in what you call your death experience, we lovingly and disrespectfully call it your croaking experience, because there is no ending to that which you are, but you return to that, you see. We just think that it is so empowering to return to it every time you lose it even a little bit. And so you can play it one of two ways. You can keep up with it. Today, most of you are feeling really good. As we are speaking these words that we know, and you are listening to these words that we know, you are resonating in most cases with that which you know. And that's why you keep wanting to sort of yip a little. In other words, you can feel the power of who you are. You can feel the power of who you are. You can feel it. So you could move from this point forward and just care about how you feel, because Abraham today convinced you that the manifestation that you've always been looking for is the one that you have control over instantly. Instant manifestation of your mood, instant manifestation of your attitude. You get really, really good at that. And so you can just ride this wave. You can just monitor. Somebody could say something to you and say, I don't want to go there. I think I'll go over here. And if you don't but the thing about it is all of you, without exception, have a hot button somewhere of some vibration that you didn't clean up. And so you're not going to be able to ride that wave perfectly and just live happily ever after from this point forward. Somebody's going to push a button. Somebody's going to push a button. And when they do, you're going to leave the vortex and you're going to forget everything that you heard here today, because you're not going to be a vibrational match to it. And you're going to, for a moment, revert back to your old belief system, which was, they shouldn't have said that because it hurt my feelings. And depending upon then how willing you are to endure the negative emotion will depend on what happens next. If it stings as much as it will now that you've been here where you've been, so that you say, ooh, don't want that anymore. In other words, once the cat sits on the hot stove, it doesn't sit on any stoves at all, Mark Twain says. Once you sit on a bee, you're aware of bees. Once you eat something that makes your head swell up, you don't eat it again, usually, if you knew what it was. In other words, most of you are wise enough to stay away from those things that you recognized were detrimental or not feeling good when you encountered them before. And we just want you to put thoughts into those thoughts and subjects and attitudes and into that category, and just be more aware of what you're thinking about. So you could do it that way. You could ride it carefully, sort of like Mark is riding the sound buttons. He's really watching the monitors, because he's got a lot of people out there that he doesn't want to be blasted when we say, but. He has to adjust the dial. He's riding the frequency so that they don't all just turn off their computer. So you can do that. You can ride the emotional frequency, or you can not ride it until some manifestation that's really not pleasing happens. In other words, it doesn't matter how long you endure the negative emotion before you decide you're not going to endure it anymore. At the moment that you decide you're not going to endure the manifestation, unwanted manifestation of negative emotion, then you begin making changes.
Awesome. This is good. So, if we So if we see, all this is about authenticity and self-love, and so if we're completely authentic and we see no lack in self, can we see lack outside of ourselves?
Here's what's a little off about the approach that you're making. Rather than trying to come to the conclusion of being the authentic self that you want to be, we want you to make it lighter and just come to the conclusion that you want to be the happy person that you want to be right now.
Okay.
Because in a sense what you're doing is you're willing to learn all this stuff in order to accomplish the manifestation of being your authentic self. And you're making it more complicated than it needs to be. And but here's what you're getting at. And here's the way we will verbalize it back to you. If you care enough about how you feel, that you practice it frequently until you are chronically feeling good feeling emotions, once you're mostly there, it will not be possible for you to attract something that feels negative to you in that extreme way that you were doing before. There will always be contrast, but then you'll be riding the meter a little more delicately. So what it comes down to is, it really doesn't matter what anybody thinks of you, but it matters a lot what you think about what they think. And the freedom that you seek is the freedom from that care. Because the freedom from that care is the freedom from resistance, and freedom from resistance is the key to your being your authentic self.
Perfect, yeah.
So when I don't give a rip what you think, that's not enough. I have to give an enormous rip about what you think, source energy. Because when I care how you think, when I care about what your frequency is, and I tune myself to it, now I am my authentic self. Now I am the unconditional lover. Now I am one who can stand in the face of a moment not being perfect, and I can unconditionally love it because I understand that everyone's on a journey and it's where they're going that matters, not where they are. It's their authentic self that matters. Ooh.
And when we're
wait.
Okay.
So when I'm my authentic self, then I see their authentic self. And when I see their authentic self, then I uplift them to it. But if I'm not my authentic self, then they may suck me into seeing their not authentic self, and now we're both out of the vortex blaming each other for how we feel.
Yeah, okay.
So who's going to break the chain of pain? Me.
Because
I understand. Because I care about how I feel. I care so much about how I feel that I'm going to be tuned in, tapped in, turned on to the whole of that which I am. Because I want the freedom of alignment that it gives me. Oh, and the byproduct of it is I'm going to help you out. But if I make the main effect be I'm going to help you out, now I'm looking at you where you are, and now I'm not my authentic self because my inner being isn't looking at you where you are in a resistant sense. Now let's stay here for just a little bit. So does that which man calls God, does that perspective see you where you are? Yes. There is not a consciousness that is looking away. That support is always there, unequivocally and eternally. It's just not freaked out. Because Source understands the big picture, knows where you're going, knows who you really are, knows that you have the power to manifest the emotional manifestation, which will then lead to every other manifestation that follows it.
Okay. So by being, Jesus was authentic.
Sometimes, not always.
Not always. Okay. So what's the distinction between, not giving a rip what other people think and having compassion?
Well, this is where we like you throwing the word in here. We tossed it in a little bit ago too. We would like to define compassion in this analogy by acknowledging that Utter compassion is a complete and not freaking out awareness of where someone is. That is the utter compassion. Because think about it. Think about it. If there's the slightest discomfort as you look at where someone is, you've got nothing to give them. So utter compassion must be the okayness with where you are, the all rightness with where you are, because after all, it's temporary and it's the beginning of where you're going. Can you feel it? It's huge. It's the missing piece. It's the piece that medicine is looking for. It's the piece that everyone who's wanting to feel good is looking for. It's what's missing in relationships that aren't working. It's the peace. The okayness with what is, because it's so temporary. And because this blessed what is, produced this. And without this blessed what is, this expanded beingness, which is the promise of eternity, could not exist.
That's it. Thank you.